first part of our agenda is the CloseReach news from Kevin. So Kevin, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Gerry, and welcome everyone to our Quality and Compliance Special Interest Group. A little bit of news about the latest release of QualiWare. It looks like that's been pushed back a little further, so we will not have a QualiWare 6 release until end of June earliest. So we're hoping to get some further information from QualiWare on that, but we did get some timing release information. So we're looking forward to hopefully having an update from QualiWare partway through the month, and we'll provide that to primary, secondary, and technical users if we do get that. But you know, it's not looking good for end of May. So, but we had heard that later in June was looking good. Our GCEA solution contract has another year to run. We're just at the end of our 6th year, the first extension year beyond the the initial 5-year term, and they're underway right now as an effort by CBSA to reach out to all of the departments to gather feedback to go to PSPC. And from our side, we're working with PSPC to make sure that they have all of the necessary information to move ahead quickly with something that that will expand beyond the 2023 timeframe. In terms of our CloseReach ISO 9001 registration, people on our last QualiWare Enterprise Architecture User Group meeting heard this. We achieved our registration at the beginning of April, and no major or minor non-conformities, and only 2 opportunities for improvement that were noted by our registrar. We're really happy to have achieved that, and really in 3.5 to 4 months from a standing start. So we had done some upfront work documenting some of our processes, obviously, using QualiWare, but pushing everything into our compliance management accelerator and conducting all of the internal audits necessary for registration. Everything went very, very smoothly, and we got some very good compliments from our registrar on the system. The ease of being able to link to information, access the necessary documents, know who is responsible for what, or just a few different items noted. So we have that accelerator built out for 9001, and we are extending that to our version 2. We'll actually be looking at occupational health and safety. We were initially going to address the 27001 standard, but there's a large market opportunity here in Ontario for 45001. With the provincial government and WSIB refunding a large amount of premiums to companies who achieve that ISO standard. So we're going to be extending our our predefined turnkey solution to include 45001. Simultaneously, from a technical point of view, we're still working on our 27001, but that registration will be delayed slightly. And targeted after that, some additional work on 17025, 14001, and also 55,000 asset management standard. So we look to have, and we actually do have those different standards instantiated in the tool, in terms of requirements models with the full descriptions of the standards. We just haven't gone through the gap analysis and built out, the specific components of the management system. So if there are customers out there who are interested in 27001, we can give them our base Accelerator tool, plus if they own that standard, we will include the requirements model that we've built out for the standard and provide that to Government of Canada, any Government of Canada organization at no additional cost. There is a little bit of setup, professional services required, but the Accelerator itself has, is no charge to our government customers. Some training updates. We are in the process, and this can apply in the quality and compliance space. It really is oriented towards business management. We are in the process of building out a 4 half-day session curriculum aimed at non-technical QualiWare users. So we have, when we've run training for different customers, have had people attend the training and frankly have them say, I have no intention of ever touching the tool, but I need to know the tool's capabilities. And so we've looked at that and we're mapping out a 4-session set of workshops, really, 2.5-hour sessions, again, aimed at management so that they can understand how they might use this tool set in their particular situation. So a very business-oriented focus to this. And, frankly, that's been lacking. While we do offer, Roger Burleton's business architecture training and things like that, it's not really, and which is great for setting directions for your organizations and, implementing different enterprise architecture and process management and quality concepts. This program that we're setting up will focus, from a non-technical perspective on the use cases for QualiWare. So that's all I have, Gerry. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. So now we're on to our feature presentation. Mike Hart is our speaker today. He's going to talk about using risk and opportunity assessments in the strategic planning cycle. If you don't know Mike, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about him. Mike is a recognized fellow of the American Society of Quality with an MBA specializing in total quality management. He's also on the advisory board. He's the board advisory chair for the Canadian Public Sector Excellence Network and has developed and taught post-secondary level courses in statistics and quality management practices. He's got over 37 years in quality management and organizational excellence, and has facilitated the implementation and assessment of ISO 9001 based quality management systems, integrated quality / EHS management systems, and organizational excellence models internationally in both the public and the private sectors. So with that, Mike, you can take over the screen and do your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Gerry. That was well thought out.
Yeah.
Now everybody sees why I didn't introduce myself the first time around. So I guess the first thing I'm going to ask is to make sure that everybody can see this and everybody can hear me. Is there any problems in that regard? Everybody good? You can see it? You can hear me stuff?
Yes,
Okay.
Well, I can see it and I can hear you. So.
All right. So I'll take a couple of answers there as good to go.
Yeah.
So anyway, as Gerry had mentioned and as was advertised, the title of this presentation is Using Risk and Opportunity Assessment in the Strategic Planning Cycle. And it's just a half-hour presentation, so we're really not going to get into things in a lot of great detail, although we're going to touch on a lot of things. And it's really surrounding strategic planning, the strategic planning cycle and how to do strategic planning, but it's introducing other variables as well. So because we're going to be looking at a lot of different things about strategic planning, there are really three key points that I think I'll want people to kind of remember as we're going through this. One is we're talking about a strategic planning cycle along with an introduction to a methodology. The second thing is we're going to be using risk and opportunity ratings to actually prioritize the results of the strategic planning meetings. And the third thing is at least 8 elements of ISO 9000 there will be at least 8 elements of ISO 9001 that you'll be helping to meet. So just by doing this one process, you capture a lot of the requirements of the ISO 9001 standard. And when I say ISO 9001 standard, I also mean the other standards that go along the same, using the same criteria with the basic elements in the other international standards, like health and safety, like environments, like security, etc. So the last time that I did a presentation for CloseReach was last November, and that was sort of a narrative style. And then there were any questions that were asked at the end. But this time around, I just invite everybody that if you do have a question, just pipe up, and we can take them as we go along. Okay.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, we're also going to be talking about strategic planning methodology, but not in great detail. And the one that I'm going to introduce is called the balanced scorecard. Now, strategic planning itself has been around, been in the forefront since the 1960s. Not to say that strategic wasn't practiced by some people before then, but it really came to the forefront in the 1960s. But it wasn't really until maybe the late 1980s or the 1990s that they really looked at anything else when they got together besides money, how to make more money, and that's it. What were the different objectives that we would set to make ourselves more money, make more sales, do this, do that, and it was pretty well almost a one-dimensional look-see. So along came a couple of fellows from Harvard, and they developed a methodology called the balanced scorecard, where they stated, you should look at a little bit more than just money. And in fact, if you look at things in this way, as far as levels go, if you start with this bottom level, whatever you do down there, whatever objectives you set to improve yourself at this level will help the next level. And then whatever objectives you set to help that next level, it's almost like it's doubling the strength. It's going to help the next level, and so on and so forth. As you can see in this this picture, down at the bottom, it talks about employee skills and attitude. Well, if you focus objectives down there and you grow stronger as far as your employee base, it's going to help you at that next level, which is the creation and the fulfillment of whatever quality products and services you have, and whatever you're producing for your customer. And if you can build on that, then it's going to cause the customer to become more satisfied, more loyal. And if you have more loyal customers and more satisfied customers, business pretty well just comes to you. And that's the whole reason behind the balanced scorecard. So I just wanted to bring that up because even though I'm going to be talking about the steps of strategic planning, this is a way to take those steps and really make it good for your organization. Okay. So this next slide actually kind of lays out the steps for a strategic planning cycle. And we're going to be going through these steps in more detail through the rest of the presentation. So if you take a look at it, you get steps 1 to 9, and actually the shading right now, don't worry anything about the shading. It just shows that you're getting closer to your goal, which is the completion of the strategic planning cycle, and that's all it means. But the actual, when you get together with your management team or whatever team you have to brainstorm what objectives you should have and what actions you should take to help meet those objectives, et cetera, that's kind of surrounded by a rectangle box, if you notice, from steps 2 to 7. But the first step is to gather data. And after the data, we get together and we do a SWOT analysis. We assess the risks and opportunities coming from the SWOT analysis. We create the objectives. We select the measurement methods. We determine the baselines and targets, and we plan the actions. And that kind of simplifies all of the steps of the strategic planning. You'll see a big money bag down at the bottom where it says, just underneath 8 and 9, where it says approved budget. Now, depending upon how long your budget process is, you'll want to do this in turn to be able to feed into your budget process, because whatever objectives you come out of with your strategic planning sessions, you'll want to have some money to be able to go do it. And that means that when you start planning your actions, you need to determine how many resources, how much money is actually going to take to fulfill them. So you'll want to do it in line with your budget process. Okay. Any questions on that one?
Nope.
Now, just one thing I'll mention with the steps to strategic planning. You'll notice that it's done well in advance of the fiscal year that it's going to represent. A lot of that has to do with, it's better to plan before you take the steps. Otherwise, you're going to be scurrying. But it also has to do with you want to do it in line with your budgeting. Okay. But when you've finished with this cycle, and then you follow into your next fiscal year and you put your strategic plan into effect, at the end of or getting close to the same time during that fiscal year, you'll want to go through the cycle again for the upcoming fiscal year. So it's a continuous cycle.
Michael,
So that, yes.
Just one question. Gerald Ladd from SSC. I like your steps there in strategic planning. It's a beautiful slide. Just a clarification in terms of the cost benefits that you need to go through in terms of the budgets. Where would you see that fitting in that compendium? I know you need it there at the year end, going into the next year end, but would you do that somewhere in your risks and opportunities cycle?
And sorry, this is the cost benefits?
Yeah, the cost benefit of continuing your work.
Yeah. And so that's a specific thing you have in the federal government, is it?
Yes, in order to get your budget allocation.
Right. So the thing is, I'm not totally familiar with the process for cost benefits within the federal government and how the federal government approves budgets for the different organizations. So I'm not sure how well I'd be able to answer that question. And that's why I said that you have to take a look at your budgeting process to see how this might fit in there. Because if you have to do cost benefits for, let's say, for example, for the objectives that you've set, then you may have to do this a lot earlier on.
Gerald, I think it might actually sort of fall in the gathering, the gathering data area, because that's going to be part of what goes into, a SWOT analysis or looking, as you assess different opportunities, what are the benefits to those things, right? So I'm thinking
that's what I was thinking.
You're going to start there, but when you get into the next year and you start this cycle over again, you're going to want to pick those things that you identified last year And I mean, really, you know, that's going to be one of the things that you should be measuring through the year, right? I mean, but too often in the government, people set these big cost benefit, you know, statements at the very beginning of a project, and until 8 years later, when it's actually delivered, do they actually go back and review it and say, should we keep continuing? Sometimes that happens, but not very often.
Okay, so let's take a look and just keep an eye out and let me know if you see, as we're going through the rest of this presentation, if you see a place where that might actually happen, or during this step when that might actually happen. So that first step, gathering data, is actually called an environmental scan. And this is where you're gathering data from all points of your organization that will allow you to get an idea of where your organization sits, where your markets are, whether it's private industry or government, because you always have clients or customers in certain markets, in certain geographic locations, things internally and externally. For example, you might have, as far as the federal government goes, you might have different objectives being set above your organization, guiding objectives or guiding policies. For private organizations, you might have those coming from the corporate level. You might have key performance indicators, key things that you measure within your organization. You find, well, we want to be at this level, but we're not. We're only halfway there. And so that might be some information that you gather that might help the team to say later on, we should set an objective to increase in that area, because our key performance indicators indicate that we're falling behind. You may have new and emerging technology. You want to bring this information in. You might want to look at your culture, the level of knowledge within your organization. We're right in the middle, I think, of baby boomers retiring. So if any organization was going to be thinking of strategic planning this year and next year, one of the objectives might be to increase the level of knowledge, okay, within their corporation, because it's starting to leak. Management system standards, you might decide that you're going to implement this or implement that, a quality management system, environmental management system. They might be they might determine set objectives for the end of the year as well. And if you have been doing this for a while, then you would want to consider your previous year's strategic objectives and their status. So the gathering data, the environmental scan, is to put together a data package for the people who are going to be in on the strategic planning sessions that gives a good indication of where the organization is, where it should be going, and how it's doing getting there in the first place. Okay. Now, up in the top right-hand corner, you'll take a look at, there's a couple of elements from the ISO 9001 2015 standard. The first one is 4.1, understanding the organization in its context. This gathering data step is completely all about understanding the organization in its context, and it will help you to completely meet that element. The second one is the 5.2.1, establishing the quality policy. Well, the quality policy needs to be established in order to be part of this data package. So again, it would help to ensure that that is done. And 7.1.6, organizational knowledge. Well, you're gathering data, you're getting together to determine everything about the organization. That is a large part of organizational knowledge. So it's helping to meet that element as well. So one of the things within the environmental scan should be interested parties. And that is, if you take a look at the top right-hand corner again, that is 4.2 in the ISO 9001 standard, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Now, the whole idea behind this is that used to be we would just focus on the customer and that's it. And yes, or the client, if you're in the federal government, the client. But it's not just about that stakeholder. There are other stakeholders. Maybe that's the most important stakeholder or almost the most important, but there are others that are also key. And you should be looking at them. And this causes you to have to create that list and understand what those needs and expectations of those other stakeholders are, like employees, like perhaps your partners, if you have an organization that is directing you, including your suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. So again, having that environmental scan, and as you'll see in there, it talks about needs and expectations of relevant interested parties. That's this one. Interested parties and key stakeholders. So once you gather that information package together and you organize it and you give it out to the team that's going to be meeting to determine what the organization's strategic objectives should be, then you hold a meeting. Or it's like a retreat. Usually they hold a retreat. And one of the first steps within the retreat is called the SWOT analysis. And all the SWOT analysis is an organized brainstorm. And it's a brainstorm from the people that you feel are most in the position that they're influential within the organization. Normally they're leaders, but you may invite some other influential people. And these are people that know the most about the organization. They are best suited to set the direction for the organization. And you do a brainstorming activity. So the whole thing about the SWOT is it's an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And these are the 4 things that you're going to ask people to brainstorm. Now, it's interesting to look at the little icon there, SWOT. You'll see with the SW, it's pretty well in a matrix where the strengths and the weaknesses, the S and the W, are internal, and the opportunities and the threats are external. So that when these groups of people are brainstorming, they know what to look for. They're not just looking all over the place. They know, okay, opportunities and threats, I need to think about external opportunities, external threats, not internal to the organization, etc. Also, when you take a look at the columns for S and O, strengths and opportunities, those are things that are helpful to the organization. And the same thing with the W and the T, the weaknesses and the threats, those are the things that are harmful to the organization. So again, it helps with the SWOT, it helps when they're brainstorming each of these categories to think the S, the strengths are internal and helpful, the opportunities are external and helpful, the weaknesses are internal and harmful, etc. And that helps them to brainstorm. So let's say you have this session, you have this retreat, you're doing the SWOT, which is essentially a brainstorming of all the things within the organization that represent their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You throw them up on the different flip charts. You ask people to add check marks to ones that are already there that they agree upon. Because if you do that, then you'll start to see some of the items that really have a lot of backing from the others as well. So here's where we come to where risk and opportunity ratings to help prioritize comes into play. And you'll notice up in the top right-hand corner, again, we have an ISO 9001 element called 6.1 Actions to Address Risks and Opportunities. Normally, when you do a SWOT analysis and you throw a whole bunch of stuff out there in a brainstorm, you've got a lot of information, a lot of items, you always need to bring them down to an organizable amount. you can't have 50 objectives. So you have to go back to the group and say, okay, which ones are we going to select? And that takes a while. And so that's why we're using the risk and opportunity rating process to prioritize rather than other ways, because you can actually, it helps you to do it very quickly, and you can meet one of the main elements of ISO 9001 at the same time. So keeping in mind, of course, that a risk is a potential for a loss, an opportunity is a potential for a gain. And that's it. The two are at odds to each other. Most strategies and plans entail both risk and opportunity, and as such, both play a role in decision making. So we want to avoid risks, and we want to exploit opportunities. And you can already see where the language is very similar to helpful and harmful type of thing. Okay, these are opportunities, these are risks, and the language plays in the same way with the SWOT analysis. So here's the thing, and I've mentioned this a couple of times to people. Whenever I go looking for risk and opportunity on Google, for example, because I want to find out how to do risk and opportunity ratings. And there's always examples of, okay, here's an article about risk and opportunities and blah, blah, blah. And then they just start talking about risk. And that's it. Opportunities are forgotten completely. And I've seen this time and time and time again. So I had to develop what is called a mirrored matrix system for risk and opportunity. And if you take a look at the risk rating matrix, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going from the bottom left up to the top right, where the 5 is a red and the 1 is a green, because risk is bad, so it gets the red. Low risk is good, so it gets the green. And if you take a look at the opportunity rating matrix, well, it's exactly opposite, where 5 is green because opportunity is good, and low opportunity 1 is red because no opportunity is bad. Okay, so they're exactly opposite to each other. But if you're looking at an opportunity and you're rating it a 5, the numbering system is the same. If it's an extreme opportunity, I want to do something about it. And over in the risk rating matrix, if it's an extreme risk, I want to do something about it. So other than the fact that the colors are different, they're the same. So you can rate them the same way. The only difference is when you rate them. Both have down at the bottom an impact, but on the risk rating matrix, up the left-hand side, that scale is called likelihood. How likely is it for that risk, that thing to happen? Well, that wouldn't be suitable for the opportunity rating matrix, so we had one going up the side that said ease of implementation. How easy would it be for that opportunity to be implemented? Both have the same bottom scale impact, but they each have different side scales. Okay, the big thing to remember is the rating system is the same. So when you get a high number 5, those are the ones you go after. If you get a high number 4, perhaps those are the ones you go after as well. So there's an activity. You rate the risks and opportunities from the SWOT. And remember, I said that the SWOT is a brainstorming activity. It's a whole bunch of stuff that goes out there. Suggestions for objectives, so things that we need to take care of, things that we need to improve in or take advantage of. And so you have a whole bunch out there, but you need to bring it down to a manageable lot. And that's why you rate them. You add the risks and opportunities identified in the SWOT analysis to the risk registry. Now, we don't have a picture of a risk registry here, but I think that Kevin may be showing that afterwards. I'm not sure, but he may. A risk registry and how that works in QualiWare. But a risk registry is really just a database. Okay, it notes the risk or the opportunity, what the rating was, what the actual description of it, whether you need to do something about it if it has a high rating, and so on and so forth. Okay. So you determine the likelihood and the impact of risks, or the ease of implementation, the impact of opportunities, using the applicable rating matrices. Then you assign them ratings. So let's just imagine that we had all of those suggestions or recommendations coming from the SWOT analysis, each of them rated. You've got a bunch of people around the table. They're not going to agree on everything, but they're going to have some sort of numbering system to be able to rate these things that are coming at them. They rate them, and the formula is simple. You just take the average and you round it up or you round it down. In this example, there were 4 people. They went anywhere from a 3 to a 5. They didn't have to argue. You know, there might be some discussion that causes some people to go up, some people to go down, but then you cut off the discussion because you have a lot of things to talk about. And then you have your final number, you divide it into the number of people, you have your average, and that's your number. So with risk and opportunity treatments, these are the things, the actions that you're going to take whenever you determine what objectives you're going to have in the first place. And I'm going to, just by the way, I'm going to be sending out a PDF document of all of these slides. So you're going to be able to access them later. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But this is these are the type of actions that you normally can take in order to reduce risk. In the case of an opportunity, usually you're just trying to increase that opportunity or take advantage of it. So let's go back to our strategic plan. We assigned objectives to our high-rated risks and opportunities. You might have decided as a team we're only going to do 4s and 5s. There's no set rule, but you determine amongst yourselves what you're going to accept. And so let's say that out of that, we got a selection of about 4 to 6 different objectives. And oh, by the way, there's no reason why you can't combine the recommendations for the SWOT analysis to make one objective, because there may be a bunch of similar ones. Something to take into consideration is how should you write a strategic objective, okay? And down at the bottom, it just shows a very simple way to do it. It says action and detail and metric and unit and deadline. And this example is for the private industry, but let's take a look at how we might be able to see it in the public sector. In the private industry, expand our international operations into 3 new markets by December 21st, 2024. So they have a specific date that they have to do this by, that they're going to be monitoring. The measurable is 3, and the thing is new markets. And what is it that they're going to do? They're going to expand, which means they're going to have more, not less, more. And the thing they're going to expand is their international operations. So on the public sector side, you might need to, it might be a fairly new unit, and they're starting to provide a service, but they haven't provided in all areas where they could, and they might want to expand their service into 3 new, whatever you call it, if you call it a market or if you call it a new jurisdiction by a certain date. Okay. The big thing is it has to be very, very clear for people to see and very, very simple for them to help them organize it into action. What should be included in these objectives? Well, you should have a description, an objective statement. Objective means everybody can read that statement and understand it the same way. You should have a method of measurement, something that's very easy to measure. In this case, well, it says amount of sales, but in that it said amount of new markets. You should have a measurement owner. This is the person that's going to be responsible for monitoring how well you're doing and meeting that objective. You should have a frequency. How often do you monitor that, or how often do you update that that measurement? You should have a baseline. In other words, where are we right now? And you should have a target. Where do we want to be by the time that we say that we're going to be finished with our objective, that we're going to meet our objective? These are the things that should be included. And here's an activity of completing the objectives. So number one, you determine the strategic objectives based on the rated risks and opportunities that came from the brainstorming that was the SWOT analysis. You assigned a focus area to each objective. Now, watch your eyes. I'm just going to go back for a second. What I mean by focus area is one of these. These are focus areas: learning and growth, internal business process, customer, financial. This could be just budget. It doesn't have to be financial. It could be something else if you're working in the government. Okay, so that's focus area. Number 3 is determine the method of measurement for each objective. Number 4 is determine the frequency. Number 5 is determine the measurement owner. 6, determine the baseline and target. And 7, review the results. If you're going to use the that methodology for your strategic planning, are the strategic objectives holistic or are they very narrow in scope? And after you do that, these are the next steps. You need to determine the initiatives to help you meet your corporate objectives. This is when you can determine also how much you think it's going to cost. You should assign responsibilities and due dates to the initiatives. You should communicate these objectives and targets throughout the organization and encourage actions by employees, because otherwise you're just relying on a small group to make these things happen. And you should monitor the results frequently. I would suggest monthly. You don't want to monitor them once annually at the end of the year just to find out that you didn't meet it. Even quarterly, you know, it's not a lot of time for you to change direction if you need to. And then when you're finished, you complete the cycle and you start again same time each year. And by the way, up top, we have a couple of more elements from the ISO standard that are help being met. 7.4 communication, and this is communicating this to all of the employees. And 9.1 monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. And that was it. So just the first question I have is to that question that was earlier, as far as the costs. Did you find any place in there where you might do that?
I could infer it. No, you're doing well. Gee, I really like your slides in your presentation. Keep going. Michael.
Okay, no, well, actually, I'm at the end.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's,
gee, I'm more.
Okay, sorry, but you know, I'm right at I think I'm at a little bit 2 minutes over my time limit. So
no, you're at the thank you. Yeah, good.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions beside Gerald? Going once, going twice. 3 times, I hand it back over to Gerry.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Just give me a second here. Okay. Again, thank you, Mike. That was excellent presentation and very useful information. So now we're going to go on to the next part. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my page here. Okay, so Kevin now is going to demonstrate some of the applications in the Compliance Management Accelerator and in QualiWare in general that apply to the presentation Mike just gave. So I'll hand it over to you, Kevin, if you want to take over the screen.
So I'm actually going to show, first of all, a little bit of documentation from QualiWare. It's a bit dated in some of the views, but actually still relevant. So everybody knows that QualiWare is a meta model driven tool. So there are different elements, objects that can be expressed either on their own or as part of a diagram, and there are attributes within those different within those different objects. And I just want to get this way. And in QualiWare, the meta model that's used to look at risk can be tied to the financial side of things or to the process side of things. It could be tied to strategies or goals, products, services, systems, or organizations. So the underlying risk management meta model, has a lot of different linkages and relationships within the tool. And, as Mike talked about a little bit, for every risk, there's a way to mitigate that risk, reduce that risk. And so there are activities, control activities tied to that. From a tool-based perspective, it's very easy to look at, and I'm in QualiWare here, outline various risks, identify the type of risks, assign them perhaps a numerical, indicator, and different values. You can look at, and this is the old slide. Before we had dialogues on the left-hand side, we had tabs across the top. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to paste in a couple of the new views here, but the actual attributes have not changed. Descriptions, what's it concerning, the type of risk, rationale, and you can see all of the different things, scoring, residuals, different assessments you might have handled, different controls that might apply. So all of those kinds of elements of the meta model still exist. If there's different kinds of controls, a base level control or a key control, is it preventative in nature? What kind of supporting materials or evidence do I have that show that it works? And you take all that, and now I need to integrate it into my business, into my architecture. And here's a very simple example of a process where there are certain risks identified and certain controls to help mitigate those risks. And I'll go back from the slide deck, which I'll finish with shortly, and we'll actually go to the tool and talk about some of these things as well as some direct models that relate to Mike's presentation. We talked about heat maps and, again, being able to show and visualize different kinds of things and deal with them, from an assessment or a coverage point of view. An activity can be identified and you can show that it's covering, a certain type of risk, or, there's a control coverage for a particular control. And again, different levels within the meta model. If I have a control coverage, what's its timeliness, what's its level of maturity, again, ranking and rating all of those things so that I can present a mitigated heat map showing the initial risk, and when I apply different coverages, different controls, what's my resultant risk. So then you need to determine which risks do I deal with first. So QualiWare provides all of these kinds of things out of the box in the tool set. I'm going to stop sharing that slide and I'm going to go to my browser. And we'll show some exact let me find the right screen here. There we go. So now I'm in QualiWare. I'm actually in the tool for a portion of tonight's chat. You know, sometimes it's easier to flip around from different to different kinds of models. At the beginning of Mike's presentation, he talked about how you might define a balanced scorecard. And in his slide deck, he identified a financial level, a customer level, an internal business process level, and a learning and growth level. And here's an example of one built in QualiWare. It's a balanced scorecard diagram and a particular instantiation of that. So identifying key indicators or key measurements, things that I'm going to look at. Here's the description of that key performance indicator, who's responsible for it, what its period is, you know, what level of control. Are there leading or trailing indicators to this? And I can show and graph those things. So again, here I'm showing, you know, I'm taking certain amounts of data and information and showing how am I doing? Because that's really what your scorecard is doing. And it might be an indicator that looks like this that says, hey, not very well. You know, I might be showing the value and my targets, you know, for certain kinds of activities. And again, being able to present that. And as you know, in QualiWare now, all of this can be published to the web in an interactive point of view for your customer. So if I move on from balanced scorecard, Mike had talked about gathering data, that environmental scan. Well, one of those ways is with a customer or a business ecosystem model, rather. And here's an example of that. You know, in our demonstration here, you know, this is all about an airport. Lots of risk there. And the different things around them that they interact with, whether it's government, regulators, tenants, employees. This really is your environmental scan. Large elements within that operation and things outside that they don't have any control of, but that influence what they do.
So Kevin, just a question. This almost looks like it could also be used for interested parties, key stakeholders.
It could be. So there is a stakeholder model in QualiWare, and I think everybody has, let me just see if I can.
The only reason I said that is because these things show a map of things that influence the things.
Yes. Yeah. So a stakeholder model, a business stakeholder model is one of the diagrams that, yes, you can definitely build within QualiWare. The other thing that you'd want to be looking at here, a different kind of model, is perhaps a model like this, a business model canvas. I can look at an entire organization, or I can build a business model for a specific area within that organization. And again, here you'll see things like key partners, you know, key customer segments. And this is actually a standard model in the tool, but the idea behind a business model diagram actually came from a guy in the Netherlands, and I cannot recall his name, I'm sorry, but there's a whole book on putting together, you know, these kinds of business, using a business model canvas to describe your organization or key elements within your organization. Besides that, and actually here's a different example of that. Again, looking at costs and revenues, and that may not be present in government. Well, cost structures certainly are. But, revenues could be fees, fee structures, different delivery channels, different levels of the public that we're dealing with, resources that we bring to bear. So again, being able to look and model a particular part or segment of the business. And in QualiWare, there's also an innovation canvas, and there's a third value proposition canvas. So there are a number of these canvases that have been instantiated into the tool, based on different ways that different people look at sometimes the same thing. A business ecosystem model, and maybe the business model canvas is a lower level, tighter, closer in view of that. And again, a stakeholder model is an extension of that as well. If we move on from there, we talked about, I'm actually going to go back to the tool here, but actually before I do, before I leave the balanced scorecard side of things, one thing that I'm not sure a lot of people within our user community know about is this model right here. And this is a performance diagram. So you can actually take various performance indicators and do something with them, average them together. You can derive and, add, multiply, use various statistical, analyses to define what your model is going to do. And there are some different standard deviation, variance, minimum, maximums, those types of things. So these are something that could add value to your balanced scorecard, because you may not want to show someone all of these different things. We at CloseReach, in our ISO implementation, have implemented a quality scorecard. And here it is. We have different quality objectives and organizational KPIs. Where are we in terms of completing audits? Where are we, overall, completing them on time? Corrective actions, improvement ideas, processes being validated, looking at different goals and objectives that we have within, our organization. And we use the spreadsheet tool to help, modify and edit that information. So we're using all of the same things that, Mike was just talking about here, and we've implemented them in our ISO system. Mike talked about SWOT diagrams. And here's one, and I'm in the web tool here. I'm not in QLM. So your business users with a Plus license can create a SWOT diagram. Slightly different format here, because what we've done here is also include some of the business objectives tied to those different kinds of things. And again, I can look at my Explorer and I can say, if I look at this, my strengths, well, actually there's one, I need to add business-friendly government to that. Oh, sorry, it's already there. No, let's pick one we don't have. How about effective manufacturing? Government doesn't manufacture anything, do they? So I've just reused one of the strengths, that have been identified for my organization. And so all the things that you would normally do in QLM in terms of instantiating that relationship and being able to look at it across different kinds of models happens right here in the web. So that whole reuse of information, being able to look at, and edit from the web here, this kind of information, this kind of content. So, and again, typically when we're demonstrating the tool, we're showing process models. Here's a different kind of implementation. Specify your target values, your measuring units, your priorities, your key measures. Do I have a plan of action, tied to this particular objective? My RACI, consulted, informed, does it break down? And again, all from the web. I'm actually going to go and look at a slightly different kind of heat map. We looked at the other kind when we were in QLM, and I'll actually go back there. Right, so if you're an architect and you have access to the tool, you'll be familiar with this. And I mean, you can open this, and so is this a treasury board or is this a departmental heat map, right? So is it a 3x3 or should it be a 5x5? Everybody knows, a very simple thing to change. Where do I want to add my, what information do I want to have in here? Do I want to only show numbers? I can do all of those different things when I define my heat maps. In the same way, I can define this kind of heat map. Level of significance, it's catastrophic, it's substantial, it's moderate, low, negligible, and likelihood of occurrence. And again, a very simple thing for management to look at and review. And these are built-in queries that are available right in the tool. We talked, and these menus here, again, are available right out of the box with QualiWare. One of the things that Mike talked about was risk registers. We can go look at our risk register. We can define our risk categories and types. We can look at them related to goals, related to the financial side of things, or initiatives, or processes, or systems, or information. All of these queries available out of the box. Here's my risk register in a format that people are used to using. So I can go and add my description. I can go identify my cause, and what's my pick list here? Well, I really only have a couple of choices for risk here, in terms of the various types. Actually, sorry, this one should be in my manufacturing risk. So you can give your risk managers and the people that are responsible for pulling this together the ability to maintain those, to get rid of those Excel sheets that are not linked to anything else. Here I can look at this and I can say, this information is all tied to these different projects or these different processes right here. So again, being able to, make use of QualiWare's strength, the relationships behind different kinds of content. If I look at, a compliance and risk overview, if I have a particular standard or, something that I'm looking at in terms of being able to, and I don't have any content in here. You know, risk mitigation. What are my, you know, do I have a risk and control register? You know, who do I engage in my organization? And, you know, what levels of coverage do I have against my various risks? Who owns it? How do I deal with it? You know, what's the type of risk? What's my coverage? You know, what's my reduced risk? And what's my coverage score? So again, you know, as Mike said, there's, you know, there is a scoring system underlying this meta model that's, you know, based on, you know, pretty well industry standard applications. Does anybody have any questions? I've been doing a lot of talking here.
Just, is this is in the web version? I take
yes. Yeah. This is, I think if you are 10 point, I think if you're in any version of X, actually, we'll have these menu items. But for sure, the last several, you know, 10.3 and up for sure.
Okay, thanks. Looks good.
So again, while aware, trying to give you something that's, so you're not starting with a blank sheet. And again, you may not use all of these things, right? Role-based, you know, descriptions, showing people, you know, giving people just what they need. You know, if I go back to our site here, you know, this is our standard employees webpage for our quality system. So I can, you know, I can talk to, you know, our policies and the scope of our system, and I can register a risk, you know, something that I've identified or a change. We actually took a page from CABSA's most recent presentation as a way of presenting our processes. So they had a process framework that made it very easy to drill down to lower levels, a menu system, as it were. And I liked what I saw. So we've implemented that framework in our quality management system to be able to easily drill down to lower levels. I got a bit off topic there. You know, if I want to go back and look at, you know, a particular process owner, you know, and the activities, you know, things that they can do, you know, in our quality management system, risk management is part of that. And I don't have the menus here that you saw in the other demo repository. We looked at it and said, we would like to present that this way through a series of tiles. So I can go and look at my control deficiencies or my strategic risk. And again, it's a very simple way to drill down into what I need to show, what I need to see. And QualAware is, you know, as I say, the those menus and those tiles are present right here out of the box. You know, they have a little more content in their demo repository. So, I mean, I can come in here and I can look at, you know, actually we've got a couple of graphs that'll come up here shortly, you know, showing the top controls and the top residual risks. So again, depending on your audience, will depend on what you're going to show them here. You know, if I go look at process risk to analyze the different risks and controls that are on particular processes. So again, I'll look at you know, here are my risks. Here are the different processes and things that they're concerning, the different controls that I have. And again, we've given people the ability to look at, well, actually, you know what? Let's pivot on this instead. Right? This is or maybe not tonight. Demos, there we go. All right, there we go. I changed the sequence of things, but I actually didn't pivot on. So now I'm pivoting. So I'll look at a pivot there. And by the way, could you please show me all of the places where I have already identified, certain controls, so I don't have to look through this long list to find, to find what I need. And it's really not going to help me tonight, is it? Oh, sorry. Is not empty. Helps if I click the right thing. So here are all where I have specific controls identified, or I could look at the converse and say, where don't I have controls? Where am I missing information? Should I have a team assigned to look at those different things for my part of the organization to understand, what I need to do? And for those that are familiar with our 3D visualizer, you can pick it up from there and drill down that way as well. Or if I'm in a detailed process, I could pick the context view and look at my risks, risks from that point of view. So again, I can, go to a particular activity that's, on a particular workflow, and you'll see here is my risk. That's, showing right here on my model.
Kevin, we have 5 minutes.
Yep. So I'll stop talking. And, if anyone has any questions, they've got, you got a minute or two to ask them of either Mike or myself.
Kevin. Gerald.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks good. Those spreadsheets, you can import those. You don't have to actually fill them out in QualiWare, I take.
So if you have existing Excel spreadsheets, yes, those can be imported directly into QualiWare. They're
Good.
Structured data, right? So you use a generic table interface, or I would just you cut and paste.
Oh.
But the question is, so you said your question said, so you wouldn't have to bring them into QualiWare. My question is, why wouldn't you? Because if your goal is to, and to be honest, I mean, we're really starting to play heavily in the compliance and ICE quality space. If we've seen anything from querying and talking to hundreds of organizations, it's that the biggest problem they have right now is separated systems, silos of information that are not linked together. And
Yes.
Excel is a wonderful tool, but can everybody see that information? Can everybody go analyze that information and look at it in the context of other things? And that is one of the biggest things that we have found in, we've reached out to over 1,000 organizations, individuals in organizations, to ask them these kinds of questions. And I would say probably 80% of those don't have integrated systems that talk to one another. We're saying, hey, we don't need to be the sole source of information, but at least give us access to it so we can provide a presentation layer to those people that need the information. So yeah, you can, and by the way, when you're in those Excel spreadsheets, there's a little button there that says export to Excel. It'll pop it right out to an Excel spreadsheet for you if you do want to get it out of QualiWare. and send it to someone to edit in Excel because you don't have they don't have a Plus license to be able to do that. They could edit it in Excel and send it back to you, and then you could pull it back into QualiWare.
Congratulations.
Your problem you run into, though, is which one now is the source of truth,
Right.
right? So
But
that
still being able to export this.
governance is missing, right? That QualiWare, through their governance workflow engine, you know, can provide. Hey, I want to circulate this to you to review and approve. So you're losing that kind of revision control. You know, when was it last changed? Those kinds of things you're going to lose with some of that.
Yeah, true. But still being able to export it is a plus.
For
if you
sure.
want to.
For sure. I mean, you know, we don't expect big bangs, right? Big bangs fail. You want to take this in steps. And a lot of it has to do with organizational change, getting people used to looking at something in a different way. And that takes time. So, you know, if you can get there in baby steps, then that's perfect. And if you can pull it into, you know, QualiWare where it can be linked up with other things, it doesn't take long for people to see that value. Anybody else? Any questions? Comments? Gerry, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kevin. And also thanks very much, Mike. 2 excellent presentations. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Our next quality and compliance special interest group meeting will be on July 20th, so you will get notification for that probably a few weeks beforehand. If anyone has any ideas for something they'd like to see or like to hear about, please feel free to let me know. Or if you'd like to be a presenter, we're also always looking for somebody with an interesting topic. So thanks very much, guys. Hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you all the next time.